This video is going to look into present participles as they are outlined in the Building the Meaning section on page 133 of chapter 40 in Ecce Romani. What's a participle? The definition of a participle is a verbal adjective. So it's a part of speech, we call it a verbal adjective. That means it is both a verb and an adjective. In other words, as a verb, a participle includes some type of action because that's the function of a verb. Verbs are actions, so a participle is in part an action. Since a participle is also an adjective, we know that the function of an adjective is to modify a noun, so a participle does that as well. A participle then, by function of it being a verbal adjective, has to accomplish two things. It is an action, but it is that action modifying some noun, some other person, place, or thing. That's a participle. That's what it does. Here's a Latin sentence. Corneliam et Flaviam clamantes audivit. In this sentence, clamantes is going to be our participle, and we'll see why, the form of that, in the next video for this chapter. But for now, just take my word for it. That's a participle. And our translation of this sentence is, we heard Cornelia and Flavia shouting. That ing, shouting, on the end of it there, that's going to be our clue in English that we have a participle. Participles almost always end in ing, especially present participles. So as long as we have that on a verb that is, again, modifying a noun, we know we have a participle. Let's see how this works. First off, the action. Obviously, to shout is an action, so that we can check that box off for this being a participle. It's a verb. And it's an adjective because who is doing the shouting? Well, it's Cornelia and Flavia. So in this sentence, this participle is actually modifying two different nouns, Cornelia and Flavia. So it modifies a noun, check. It's an action, check. That means it's a verbal adjective. That means clamantes here, shouting, is what we call a participle, a present participle. Let's look at another sentence to get some more practice with this. Lupum ingentem puellas petentem conspeximus. Petentem here is our participle, present participle. And here's the translation. We saw a huge wolf attacking the girls. So it's an action, attack, obviously. And here this is agreeing with something. It's agreeing with wolf. The wolf is what is doing the attacking. So petentem, or attacking, with that ing again, notice that, we have a participle. Interestingly, because participles are verbs, they can take a direct object, like in this sentence above. Who or what was the huge wolf attacking? Well, that's the girls, puellas, and you'll notice puellas is feminine accusative plural. It is the direct object of the present participle petentem. Why? Again, because it's a verb, because a participle is partially a verb. So participles can take direct objects. Participles can also be modified by things like ablative phrases. In that sentence that we saw earlier, we could say something like, we heard Cornelia and Flavia shouting in a loud voice, magna voce. We could add an ablative of manner on there, because again, we can do those different types of things with verbs, so we can do them with participles as well. A few more things on participles. Because these are present participles that we're learning in this chapter, the present part of that is important. The action of these present participles happens at the same time as the main verb in the sentence. That's important, so I'll say it again. The action of a present participle happens at the same time as the main verb in the clause. So if the main verb is present tense, the present participle is happening now. If maybe we have a perfect tense verb, so something happened, well, if we have a present participle, then that action happened at the same time as that main verb, and ditto for future tense. That's very important to remember. That'll come into play later as we learn more types of participles. Finally, participles, because they're adjectives, can function as a substantive. You'll recall the definition of a substantive is when an adjective functions as a noun. It literally stands in the place of a noun. This happens when it's on its own, when it's not modifying any noun. So this sentence, subito exclamavit unus ex adstantibus, blah, blah, blah. Adstantibus is a participle. We'll be able to recognize that after our second video. The translation here is suddenly one of the bystanders. Most literally, adstantibus is the men standing around. So most literally, we would say suddenly one out of the men standing around shouted. What are we missing? The word men. There's no viris here in the ablative after x. We just have adstantibus. So that is standing in the place of a noun. That means it's called a substantive, so it's functioning as a noun. So we can in English just say bystanders. Suddenly one of the bystanders shouted. We're going to see this a lot with a construction unus ex, one of the whatevers, the people standing by, the people doing this or doing that, the ing there telling us that we have a participle. So participles can function as substantives. They can take direct objects. They can be modified by ablative phrases, as we saw, because they embody all the functions of verbs and adjectives. So, Latin 2 students, for homework, due before class tomorrow being Tuesday, December 18, 2013 AD. What I want you to do is email to me the first 3 sentences in exercise 40C. So exercise 40C, please do numbers 1, 2, and 3. Be sure you follow all the directions for that exercise, and that needs to be emailed to me before class begins tomorrow on Tuesday for a grade. See you next time.